So, I basically had a mad idea today. Now, first of all, this mad idea is literally mad. It's not something that's going to happen. It's not something that necessarily everyone would like. I mean, some people will go, oh no, that'd be a terrible idea. Don't worry about it. I do not work for Blizzard. I am not listened to by Blizzard. There is no chance that any of my crazy ideas will ever end up in the same file of crazy ideas that somehow make it into the game. But I had this crazy idea today, and it festered around in my head and bounced around in there on the long, hot Friday. And I thought, well, I might as well get it out now that it's been percolating for quite a while. And it's to do with item level. First of all, I was considering item level. Now, I've been doing a bit of Legion beta playing. I've been in the alpha and I've been in the beta. So I've been leveling again after all the characters were wiped. And you start off in 680 item level gear. And I'm leveling up and I'm thinking, you know, it's absolutely fine. The level of challenges is fine. It's okay. Mobs aren't causing me any trouble, but I'm not mincing through them, as I will do with my live gear, which is like item level 744. But then I thought to myself, well, some of my alts might have a little bit of trouble. Should I maybe start doing some stuff into Nan Jungle? Oh my god, please no. Or LFR? Oh my god, please no. To get them geared up a little bit, maybe to get them closer to that 680 that I know will be reasonable for it, that'll be okay. And anything over that, great. Anything a little bit under that won't be a disaster either. So aiming for around about 680. But then I thought to myself, when I first leveled up in WoD, when WoD first came out, I got to level cap. I was round about level 600 item level, maybe slightly over, I think, with some of the gear from Nagrand. How is someone in that gear going to cope? Now, for people who are watching this, almost to a man, we're probably going to say, well, that's fine, because all my characters are over that, because I've done some at least basic stuff and managed to get them up to maybe 640, 650. But what if you haven't? What if during Legion you are leveling up, or new player is leveling up? Maybe they get the level 100 boost, but that gives you 640 gear, good 40 item levels below. Might be a lot tougher, plus they don't know how to play the game because they've just been boosted through 100 levels. Might they have a really tough time of it? And I'm thinking, there's a huge difference between naturally leveling, and of course this person might, you know, decide to play a different character. They've used their boost, or they want to just do an alt. That gets through the WoD content and they're level 600, item level 600. Maybe even earlier, because of course you'll level through more quickly. So maybe you won't even get to Nagrand, you won't have all that gear. You might actually be lower than 600 item level, and then you're suddenly going into Legion. My goodness. And I thought to myself, has this always been the case? It wasn't. I mean, when I finished Vanilla and TBC came out, of course I had no problems on my main, my Paladin. I had a mixture of gear, Nax right down to Norton Core, a huge mixture, but it was plenty good enough. But I also had alts that I leveled up during TBC. And they didn't struggle either. Level 58 straight into Outland, no real problems. Not as killing things as quickly as on the Paladin, but there was no real issues. And so I played about a little bit, and I came up with a bit of a graph, and it was a chart, I should say, sorry. Now, obviously there's been a little bit of estimation here. With WoD, I can be fairly accurate with it because we're in it now. With the other ones, I've tried to work out, I've based the top item level, the highest item level you'll have, based on doing the hardest mode raid content. And at the lower end, I'm not saying I've accurately portrayed what someone would be when they get to level cap. I've based it on assuming that they would do dungeons and having a reasonable set of gear from the dungeons that are round about level cap, without specifically making them go into dungeons that need level cap, like the heroics from TBC onwards, just the normal ones. And we end up with something like this. And we can see between vanilla and TBC, there's not a huge amount of travel time. The travel time is what I define as being the difference between the item level that you hit level cap with and what you would start the next expansion with if you've done the hardest content. Now we can see it takes a big jump up when we go into Wrath, huge jump up. So then we start to think what the reason for this could be. Is it because they introduced 10 and 25 man, so then you've got this spread of item levels across the 10, and you had normal in heroic as well, certainly after from Ulduar onwards. Is this these different forms of the same raids, meaning item level creeps coming in? Then you go to Cataclysm, it seemed to come down a bit, but then not to worry, straight back up for MOP, and then an even bigger jump up, slightly bigger jump up for WOD. And in WOD, certainly, we can say that there is a huge item level difference. For example, I got to level cap round about 600. I remember it was just over item level 600. Within a month, I was 640 because I had to, gear up and get ready for raids. So within a month, I've gained 40 item levels. That is more than the amount of the item levels, not that there was such a thing back then, but in today's money, that I gained in the whole of vanilla during my level cap time. And it's only a little bit less than during the whole period of TBC. And the reason is that we have, of course, the normal dungeons, and then you're very quickly, if you're gonna play a lot, you're very quickly going to go into heroic dungeons. And then in WOD, you would be expected to do some challenge modes each day as well. You don't have to, of course, but if you want to gear up. There's also BOEs to buy. Then you get into the raids, and then to the raids you've got LFR, which doesn't open up automatically, but you've got LFR. And then you've got normal mode, and then heroic mode, and then mythic mode. And each one of these modes, the equivalent bosses have to drop higher item level, significantly higher item level, than the earlier difficulty. In addition to which, when you go into the next raid, you need every new raid, to reward better quality loot than the one that came before it. Again, equivalent. Blackhand, for example, rewarded 700 item level gear. That was the hardest boss, or the toughest boss, shall we say, not just in terms of mechanics, but the overall thing. In tier 17, then we got tier 18, and the easiest boss was Hellfire Assault. This dropped item in Mythic 20 item levels above to accommodate this. So 20 item levels from the crap loot off the crap bosses to begin with. And it gets me to thinking, whilst accommodating all these different modes, of course, we can't prevent this item level creep, and we can't prevent this massive disparity between people when they just hit level cap and in the very best gear. And of course, it must be hard for Blizzard to tune encounters in the following expansion when you've got such a massive item level difference, and goodness knows what it's going to be like going from Legion to the following one. So what do they do about this? Well, some people will, of course, react by saying, we'll reduce the number of difficulties. Of course, that's not necessarily realistic because LFR exists for certain people. LFR exists for people who just want to see the content. I've mentioned this before. It's like playing an interactive film, really. It's like, watching a movie, entirely passive, apart from occasionally reaching out for some popcorn. They want to actually experience the story, so that's what LFR gives you. It's not hugely challenging, of course, but it allows you to experience the story. So Blizzard are not going to take that away, and I can sort of support that. Normal and heroic also serve purposes as well. There are people who will take a certain amount of time to go through normal, and then after that, the tier's still open. They want something more difficult. Heroic is the obvious one there. There are some who will take a certain amount of time to clear heroic. These are the ones that are hardest done by. I've mentioned this before, but nonetheless, the possibility of reforming their guild raids roster to get ready for Mythic exists, and many guilds have done that. So what do you do? And I was talking about the role of raiding. I did a video on the role of raiding in World of Warcraft earlier this week. And one of the things I was mentioning, and this is what stuck in my head, is the fact that in vanilla, when you got to level cap, you're actually straight away raiding without, and many people forget this, because when you got to level cap, you didn't do dungeons 5-man because they were actually quite tough and we didn't know how to play and our gear was shit. You certainly didn't get epics straight away. You weren't in epics within a week of getting level cap. My goodness, no, you weren't even in blues, really, apart from maybe low quality blue, low level blues. So what you did is you formed raids and you were able to 10-man, 5-man dungeons. So people just did that. You couldn't complete quests in there, but you could run through the bosses and get loot. And of course, a low chance to get anything because first of all, the loot had to drop and then you might well be competing against someone else. There was a pretty good chance of that with 10 people. But, you know, again, that increased the amount of time it took for you to gear up as well. And I thought to myself, what if instead of when you get to level cap, you just blast through easy, piece of piss, normal mode dungeons, and then equally, but only marginally more difficult, I suppose, heroic dungeons, which haven't really been worthy of the name since TBC. Maybe the starter kata. I wasn't actually playing the starter kata. I gathered there was some difficulty with those ones to begin with. Why do that? Why not actually just deliberately make level cap dungeons stunningly hard, like tune them really hard to the point where realistically you're not going to defeat them without the gear that you need from those dungeons? That would open up the possibility of forming 10-man raids of those dungeons that you just clear for gear. And then once you're geared up enough, maybe then you could do the 5-mans for quests. Maybe those quest rewards are actually quite tasty. And maybe then you remove the need for LFR on the assumption that Blizzard not only create a reasonable number of level cap dungeons, but also with each new raid tier, they introduce another, say, 5, or maybe 4 or 5 you get away with, dungeons that are raidable. You can do them as 10-man just for the loot. Would that serve the same purpose as LFR, perhaps? Especially these days, because then you can ask, well, how do they get to see the story of these raids? It's quite common now to just be able to sign up to a group and do normal mode in a pug. I know it's not necessarily ideal, and it's certainly not as easy as signing up for a queue, but it doesn't require a time commitment from you as such, other than for that raid. You can do it on different nights, depending on when you're free. You can leave it a few weeks and then find another one. There are even guilds that are set up, and because the flexible nature of normal and heroic means you could actually join a guild that maybe raids just once a week, and some weeks you can make it and some weeks you can't. And as long as you're not a key member of that roster, but you won't be a key member of that raid if that's your level of commitment, then again you're in a win-win situation because you can just drop in and out as and when you're available, as long as you're doing something to keep up your gear anyway. Now, the effect of this, of course, would mean, first of all, you wouldn't need normal and heroic dungeons. You could still do the Mythic Plus, but the Mythic Plus thing that's coming in Legion is totally different anyway. So the way I could perceive this is, you have level cap dungeons, stunningly hard, no one's going to do them, 5-man. But get 10-mans together, work your way in there. And then after that, you do them 5-man because put quests in there that give you actually very nice quest rewards. But of course, you can't do them in a raid. Then get people to do the raids, but the raids maybe start off with what now would be heroic. Because people have developed their skills in a raid. They've also got the gear. They've spent some time getting that. Maybe you don't need normal and heroic, because maybe the people who would have taken a certain amount of time to complete normal, maybe now they spend that time raiding the dungeons, 10-man dungeons, and then they're ready for heroic after that. And then you just need heroic and mythic. Call them whatever you want. It could go back to normal and heroic, couldn't it? And you've just got 2 levels for each raid tier that people can access in their own time, depending on how quickly they go through the dungeon content. And the dungeon content effectively becomes like raid content, but with a certain amount of difficulty. And you don't need to have massive amounts of item level between them as well. to make people feel more special by doing the harder ones. Because another thing, going back to vanilla, is it wasn't, like I mentioned in WoD, it's the situation where the following raid tier always rewards better item level than like the first boss in one raid tier rewards better item level gear than the last boss, the hardest boss in the previous raid. Not the case in vanilla. I was trying to think what is, to work out this chart that I showed earlier, I was trying to think, well, what is the highest item level stuff you could get? Because I can't look it up easily now because original Naxxramas isn't there. But I have some Nax gear still, but nothing off like the very latest bosses. But one of the items I came across was Death's Bargain, which I always have, which is a shield that dropped off Gluff. Now, Gluff is like very much a mid-level boss. You know, the first few bosses you would do, the first 4 bosses in Nax then would have been like the Spider Wing, there's 3 bosses there, and like Resuvius. Then you would probably do, what, Noth and Patchwork in whatever order. Then you would probably do, Grobulus after that. Then possibly Gluth. So he'd be like 7th or 8th boss. So he's very much middling. And Cthulhu, who was the end boss of the previous raid tier, and Courage, dropped better item level gear when I was comparing some of that gear than Gluth. So there was a massive crossover there. And I suppose this is why, of course, when we were doing, well, when we were doing Blackwing Lair, we still did Molten Core, but of course we'd do that anyway, just for the chance of legendaries. But when we were doing Anchorage, we still did Blackwing Lair. When we were doing Naxxramas, we still did Anchorage each week. And the reason, I suppose, is because there was this crossover of gear. The hardest bosses in the previous raid tier were giving you better loot than the lower and middle bosses in the one you were actually progressing through. Which again, I suppose, contracted the item level bloat there. And people with a higher item level still were more powerful. You just weren't necessarily ridiculously more powerful. I mean, I remember just a little anecdote, being in Tanan Jungle. This was when Tanan Jungle was still quite new, so I was still going around doing various quests and things before I lost the will to live. And I had the ring at this point. I had the legendary ring, so it wasn't brand new, but, you know, fairly new. And I had been waiting for a rare spawn for ages. And I looked away. I went for a piss or something like that. And I came back. It was before flying. I came back just to see this boss being killed. I couldn't quite get a judgment off to get a tag on it or anything like that. And I'd moved already. I was on the server I am now already as... No, I wasn't. I'd moved the server to a PvP server still. I'm trying to think now. I was Alliance at the time. So it must have been Horde. There was a Horde group that done it. It was the opposite faction anyway. And I just went mad. And I actually felt guilty about it afterwards. But I just went mad. And I just popped my ring, popped everything, and murdered them. And there was like 5 of them. And I just blew the hell out of all of them. That's mad. That is mad. I can actually take out 5 with no PvP skills, by the way. I'm shit at PvP. That just the raw power of my gear at the time, which is not as powerful as it is now even, was able to take out these 5 guys, these poor bastards, who I felt very sorry for because I don't normally behave like that, just because they had far inferior gear to me. And it just seems a little bit mad. It seems a bit mad to me. But anyway, there is my idea. So by all means, say what you think. Yes, a number of you will think, no, that's actually a mad idea. But as I said at the start, don't worry about it. It's never going to be taken seriously. It's just something I thought I need to get out of my head because it was just rattling around all day and I couldn't get it out. So this might be a nice cathartic way to get it out. But anyway, thanks for watching the video. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. I'm streaming later on tonight if you're catching this on the day I release it. If you're not, I still might be streaming tonight. And until next time, or until I see you when I'm streaming, see you later.